Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jevly, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family, helping us help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is coming to us from Kampala in Uganda. She is Morgan Limo, and she's here to celebrate Escape from the Baggage Claim. Hey, before our guest comes in, we gave a sneak preview of the Solve It for Kids podcast here on Reading with Your Kids, and it was so popular, it's like spun off. It spun off into its own thing, and my buddy, our dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this great new podcast. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Jed. Oh, I am so excited about our new podcast. We've been getting some great reviews. Everybody wants to find out what's going on and meet and listen to some of our scientists and engineers. We have done how do you map an underwater forest?
Yeah.
We have done how do you cut a person in half safely, of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have talked about improving your connection with water by going on a water walk, and we have watched Vanessa Brantley Newton create illustrations that come to life.
I took a water walk with my amazing niece. We had such a great time. I didn't fall into the water, but it was really, really fun. And I love the fact that all of our guests are giving our wonderful listeners challenges, really fun challenges that they can do together as a family. And that's so cool. Hey, tell everybody where they can find Solve It for Kids, because it's not on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's its own thing.
So please, if you want to keep listening, go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can download all 4 of the first episodes that we have, plus listen to all the new ones we have coming out. You can also find on Stitcher Radio and, of course, through our website, solveitforkids.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be part of this awesome, awesome, awesome podcast.
Well, we make a great STEM team, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, join us over at solveitforkids.com. Joining us right now from Kampala in Uganda, she is the author of Escape from the Baggage Claim. Please welcome to the show, Morgan Limo. Morgan, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Jed?
I'm wonderful. I love the title of your book, Escape from the Baggage Claim. It's, I think it's something that lots of people have experienced in their lives, being stuck down there waiting for that baggage carousel to begin and wondering when your bag will come out.
That's exactly right. And my children especially have experienced that, which inspired me to write the book.
Yes. So how old are your kids?
My oldest is 6, and I have another younger one that's about to be 2.
Wow. And I understand they're globetrotters at this young age already.
Yes, the youngest one, I want to say she got her passport at about 1 month old and was not even able to hold her head up to take the photo for it. So they've been on the road for quite some time now.
One of the things that I've heard a lot, we host international kids here in our home, and one of the perceptions that people around the world have of Americans is that we don't like to travel. We like to travel maybe within the borders of the United States, and maybe if people want to get really crazy and travel internationally, they'll go to Canada or maybe Mexico. But it's that reputation that we don't really go out and travel to places like Europe and Uganda and Asia. What do you have a sense of why that might be?
That's really interesting. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that my colleagues would say differently because they're really used to moving around. They sort of call children of foreign service families third culture kids because they tend to have their own culture from the United States. They live in a foreign country and they're sort of in this like middle third culture where it's a mixture. And they move from one place to another. So they may carry things from the last place that they were in to the next place, things like that. So we sort of think of it as a third culture. But certainly there's a lot of folks that do, travel. And I think, you know, once they sort of get that first taste, it helps them continue to travel. But, you know, the amount of Americans that hold a passport, is really low compared to some other countries. And so I think once you do sort of overcome that hurdle, then the interest is piqued and folks tend to be a little bit more open to experiencing the world.
Now, I'm just curious, how many stamps do you have in your passport? Or are you like on your 15th passport right now?
I can't say. What I can say is that I've definitely had to add extra pages to it before, and the State Department does do that. So if you need to have extra pages, they can always add some. But no, I can't even say. I've been to quite a lot of countries, traveling, maybe 15, 20. Can't say how many countries I've been to. I would have to sort of go back and count, but I've been quite a lot around Africa. I've been quite a bit in the Middle East. I'm still really, anxious to get around Latin America a little bit more. Around Asia a little bit more. And so that's in the cards for the future. But yeah, definitely at least 15 to 20, places and counting. I still have lots of travel plans.
Yeah, COVID certainly has put a damper on a lot of people's travel plans. My beautiful wife and I especially, we were very frustrated not being able to travel. We've been exploring a lot of Latin America and Central America, and it's really wonderful. And I think there's when you travel to a different country, especially if you're not fluent in the language, there's a vulnerability that you experience because you're in a new place. It's different, and you have to rely on the kindness of strangers in a lot of times. And I think that's something that's difficult for a lot of people to do.
I think you're right, but imagine that from the viewpoint of a child, because children don't recognize those same constraints. And when my kids are in another country where they may not speak the language, they will start throwing out every language that they know and trying to find if it's the right one and if they can communicate with folks. Our last country was a French-speaking country, and so my oldest daughter was speaking French very fluently. And then we went to a Swahili-speaking country, closer to this region, and people were speaking Swahili, and she's like, is it French? Like, she starts speaking French, she speaks Spanish, and she's just trying to find what's that common language. And so I think children, are less afraid, of that and really just like dive into the adventure. So that's part of what I like about, particularly traveling with kids and encouraging children to travel through books.
And that is one of the beauties of books is that, whether it's because we're locked down due to the pandemic or if it's because we're just a typical family and we don't have a couple of $1,000s to spend on airfare and hotels and we can't afford to travel around the world, books are that vehicle that can take us to different countries and experience different cultures. What kind of culture are we going to experience when we're reading either Escape from the Baggage Claim or your other book, Trip of Your Dreams?
So that's a perfect segue, Jed, in that I would say the first book, Escape from the Baggage Claim, is really just about like the humdrum of getting through the airport and waiting for your bags and them taking a long time to come out. In this case, the main character decides that she's going to venture into the baggage claim to get her bag. She literally climbs on the belt and goes back. And when she gets back there, she finds that there's a troll that's actually the guardian of the baggage. And if she doesn't answer his various riddles, all of which are travel sort of tips for children, then she won't be able to get her bag. So the escape from the baggage claim is really focused on sort of the air travel and that side of things. But then the trip of your dreams is just that, in that it's literally a trip of your dreams, because the main character falls asleep, and as she sleeps, she dreams of her perfect trip. In the book, she travels to places like China, France, Kenya, of course, Uganda, Mexico, even around the United States. She visits the Methuselah Trail in California. And so basically, it's her dreaming of all the different sights and sounds that she'd like to see, different foods, different sights, different cultural experiences. And she really gets to go really to all parts of the world in the book, but does it in her dreams. And at the end, she sort of wakes up and runs to her parents and says, I'm really, really interested to do all these things. And her parents are like, you don't have that kind of money in your piggy bank. And she's like, well, I want to go. And so I think this was sort of before COVID, but it's still applicable in this sense, in that she doesn't actually physically travel to these places, but she really gets to learn about these different places. And it really is just to spark interest in children, those like mine who are privileged enough to actually see a lot of the sites in the book, and others that may not have that opportunity, but at least should be exposed and perhaps spark their interest so that one day they may be able to see it in real life.
Yeah. Again, one of the knocks on or stereotypes of folks living here in the United States is that we don't know much more than our own country, and so we'd have a hard time finding Uganda on a map. We might have a hard time finding Africa on a map, or we think of Africa as just this one place, and we don't understand that it's actually a continent with many, many different cultures and countries and languages. And I really think that it'd be a beautiful gift for a family to give to their kids, to help them start having an appreciation for all the different cultures that exist in this world, and see the differences, but also help us understand that, deep down we are all part of this one beautiful human family.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the funny thing that I've witnessed, particularly with those children that are really well traveled, is that they don't necessarily appreciate that they're seeing some of the wonders of the world. And so there was a really great sort of thread on Facebook a little while back of children sort of sitting on the steps of the Colosseum, or at the Leaning Tower, or at the pyramids, and sort of just being like totally disinterested, not understanding sort of where they were and why it was important, or going to really fantastic museums, the Musée du Louvre in Paris, and not really understanding that like the Mona Lisa is right in front of me and this is really cool. So I think for children, you're always going to have that a little bit where they just don't necessarily see, they're going to look back later in life and be like, wow, I got a chance to visit all these places. But at the outset, sometimes they're like, what are we doing here?
Uh-huh.
Why are we here? We're on safari. I'm seeing lions and I'm seeing all sorts of animals, but like, what's going on? I can just watch this on Netflix, So I think that's a challenge that you face with all people, but like I said, especially with children. But I think that's part of the beauty of it, is that you can make it fun, give them opportunities to like recognize that there's actually a lot of cultures all around them. I mean, I'm originally from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, and you could go get like authentic Italian food or Korean food or Chinese. And like there were different parts of town. We had a really vibrant Chinatown. Like there's other places even within the States that you can sort of be exposed to different cultures and languages. You don't necessarily have to travel outside of the country to get that. But like I said, if you are fortunate enough to, it really just is a humbling experience, because the world, is there, and there's a lot more places than the U.S. And so it's just nice to be able to see, how other people live. You find a lot of similarities. You'll also find a lot of differences. And I think that's sort of the fun of exploration.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think one of the reasons folks in the States don't travel as much is because we are living in a country where, you know, it's huge. And we do experience, there's a lot of different cultures there. You know, the culture in Boston is very different than the culture in D.C., which is very different than the culture in Mobile, Alabama.
Exactly. And sometimes when I'm in a country and they're like, you guys have how many time zones in the United States? You know, the difference between Washington and California, they're like, what? What do you mean you have different time zones? And we're like, well, it's a pretty huge country. Like I said, coming from the middle of the country, you don't really realize it because at some point it took me, you know, almost the same amount of time to get to the East Coast as it took me to get to the West Coast because we're in the middle. Once I moved to the East Coast and I had to get to the West Coast, I was like, I could have flown to London, Heathrow, in the same amount of time as it took me to get to San Francisco, you know? Yeah. So I think there's also, on the other side, not so much understanding of how large America is. But besides having, you know, that melting pot of different cultures and diasporas and other folks that are in the U.S., it really is just huge. And you can spend a long time exploring the United States even. So I definitely think you're onto something there that you can road trip around the U.S. and get, you know, amazing cultural experiences as well. And sometimes you can get to other countries faster than you can get across ours.
Absolutely. Yes, we absolutely can drive to Toronto and Montreal from Boston in a lot shorter time than we can get to LA on a plane.
Exactly.
And we had a young woman from Italy join my daughter and I as we went on tour, and we traveled in a van from Boston down to Atlanta. And the student was amazed. She was like, if we're back in Europe, we would have gone through 4 or 5 countries already, and we're still in the same country.
Exactly. Exactly. No, it's so true. It's so true. But that's like the fun of it as well, because you're right. For the same amount of time that it would take you to get across a few states, you could actually pop across a few countries in Europe, and all of them have really distinct cultures and languages and experiences. So I think that's also the case. Sometimes there's a perception that things are really far, and that if you do travel overseas, you may go to one destination, but that you're limited to that place and you sort of have a round trip back to the same place. But a lot of folks, I mean, you can hop on a train and you can be going from France to Germany to Belgium, and sort of all around. The same thing on the continent here in Africa. You know, you can jump from Uganda to Rwanda to Kenya. And so people don't necessarily realize the magnitude of America and how large it is compared to other places. But you could totally plan a multi-country trip, and it takes the same amount of time as it would take for you to drive from Boston to Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, hey, just for a moment, you mentioned being part of the foreign services, and we don't have an opportunity to speak to diplomats often, although we did have the wife of the ambassador to Spain on the program not too long ago. Can you share a little bit about what the diplomat service does for our country?
Sure. I'm actually a diplomat that works on development programming primarily. And so my work is really to design foreign assistance activities overseas. That means things like public health, agricultural development, education. It's effectively an extension of the expertise that the United States has in terms of supporting other countries to improve health systems, education systems, agriculture systems, things like that. So a lot of our work is really focused on sort of long-term sustainable development and helping countries sort of be better able to service their citizens, particularly for their needs, the basic needs. There's an element of what we do that's humanitarian focused. I'm not necessarily in that space, but we do also respond to different disasters and humanitarian emergencies that happen overseas. But most of our work is really just focused on how to make sure that our partners and our citizen counterparts overseas enjoy some of the same benefits that Americans are able to enjoy. And so I think that's the crux of what we do. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for your service, because that's a beautiful thing that we're able to do here in America, is to share some of the expertise that we have and some of the blessings that this country has been blessed with the rest of the world, to help elevate everybody and help everybody have the opportunities that we are able to take advantage of here. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. I will say that it goes both ways, because we definitely learn quite a lot too. I can say, for example, in East Africa, things like mobile money are huge, and they're really, really well managed, and everyone relies on them in such an interesting way that even in the United States, you're like, do you have a PayPal, like Cash App, like how can I pay you? And we're still like sitting around the dinner table trying to figure out how to split the bill. And here, people are like at the market. Okay, I've already sent you. People are in a taxi. Oh, I've already sent it to you. So there's definitely some great like innovations and other things that we're able to share. But I really appreciate that. And I know that my colleagues in the service appreciate the support of other Americans who either are learning what we do or know what we do, because it's often not acknowledged, but we do sacrifice quite a lot to be really far away from our families and friends to do this work. But it's because it's important to us, and so we are happy to represent the American people abroad.
Yeah. Hey, it's important for us to find out where we can connect with you online so we can learn more about Escape from the Baggage Claim.
Sure. We're on Instagram at Molo Global Publishing. That's MOLO Global Publishing. We also have a website, same thing, mologlobalpublishing.com. Those are the best places to reach us to check out more about our books.
Awesome.
They're also available for purchase on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble.
Wonderful. We've had a really fascinating time speaking with the author of Escape from the Baggage Claim and also The Trip of Your Dreams, Morgan Limo. Morgan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Jed. It's been a pleasure. I'm really glad to have the opportunity.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Corinna Turner. She'll be here. We hope you will be here too. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, you may be frustrated at how difficult it is to let the world know all about your great book. We have a solution. It's called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. If our panel of parents, kids, and teachers believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And with that status comes a number of fantastic tools that can really help your book stand out from the crowd of books, from the thousands of books that are published every single month. You can learn all about it by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the author's Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down to where it says Certified Great Reads. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Morgan Limo. Be sure to check out Escape from the Baggage Claim and The Trip of Your Dreams. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Alexia Brown, Hannah Pat Oboyski. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.